Okay, so now I'm pretty much ready for the final stage of cleanup, which is going to be a manual process. Here I'm going to be using the brush tool and basically painting with white. Press D on your keyboard to reset your colors to white and black. Now you're going to be painting with white, and press B on your keyboard to get the brush tool. There it is there. Now for this kind of work we're going to be using a soft edged brush. So there we go, got a really nice soft edged brush. Opacity is going to be 100%. Doesn't make any sense to really go much smaller than that to start with, and then it really helps to be zoomed in a bit with this for this kind of work. Now because you're using a soft edged brush, you got to be careful, because even if it looks like you're going right up to the edge, you'll notice that as I draw over here, I'll make sure I'm drawing on the layer. In fact, what we're going to want to do to preserve my layer is create a new layer above all of these guys. This is going to be my painting layer. I can even name it if I want. There we go. That's the layer I'm going to paint on to white out everything. But watch what happens now. If I paint this close to the edge, I'm painting in gray here. So if I paint this close to the edge, you'll notice that I'm actually painting into the sketch. So be aware that when you've got a soft-edged brush, the actual edge of the brush is beyond the edge of the circle that Photoshop shows you. Now there's a preference we can change. Edit, Preferences, and in this Preferences here, we can go in and we go to Cursors, and we can say full-size brush tip if you want. I personally don't like the full-size brush tip, but full-size brush tip will show you exactly out to the very edge that brush is affecting. So that can be really useful for this kind of work, because it makes sure that you don't get into those areas. You can see I'm actually really brushing in the middle of my document, but it's showing me just that edge beyond which I'm not going to have any effect at all. I'm actually going to reset that because it kind of messes me up. So I'm just going to go back and back to cursors and go back to normal brush tip, but it's good to know that that option exists. Okay, so here we go. We're just going to white out the document as much as we dare, and what we're doing is a first pass just to clean up this document a little bit, and then I'm going to have to reduce my brush size and come in here and clean it up further. Now this may seem like a lot of work when it comes to doing 20 logos or whatever it is that you've got to do, but it really is worth it and improve the final quality of your artwork. Okay, so what we can do now is that we're getting into some more of the detailed work. It's actually better to work with a more precise brush. So I'm going to turn off, you can see that I'm undoing a lot because I still keep coming into the edge. That's because my brush tip is just too soft. So I can come in with a pretty precise brush tip, reduce the size a bit. There we go. And now I'll come in here and really clean this up. The only disadvantage with doing this is, as you can see, I'm making this really nice white background, but unfortunately the inside of my egg timer still looks a little bit gray, and there's really not much I'm going to be able to do about that. I can try coming back after and just tweaking those level settings. Maybe I'll achieve that, but that's just got to do with the amount of light that was present when I photographed it. Okay, a little bit of time lapse here. I thought I'd save you guys the trouble of having to witness 5 minutes of me just scrolling away at little pixels. We are just getting into the final detail work, and I figure that I do need to get the inside of this spiral. You'll notice that I keep zooming in a lot. Of course, Control Spacebar or Command Spacebar on the Mac is your best friend here, and then you really need to adjust the size of your brush correspondingly. And what I'm doing is I'm holding down the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac, and then I'm right-clicking with the mouse, and that allows me to scale my brush size. If I slide my mouse right or left, brush size increases or decreases. Up and down, have to be careful. Up and down changes the fuzziness of the brush. So you're really going to be sliding your brush right or left. Okay, so you've probably started to guess that this can be pretty tedious work. It really depends on the amount of lighting in the original shot, how much of this manual stuff you're going to have to do. Those of you that have played around with Photoshop quite a bit may start to wonder, well, aren't there more automatic methods of doing this? The truth is, yeah, there are, but for this kind of work, most of them aren't as good as the good old manual brushing out technique, sadly. Let's just explore some of them. For example, the magic wand over here. The magic wand, as you probably know, works by clicking on an area and it selects color that's the same all around. Now you might be surprised by what Photoshop has selected here given how low my tolerance is, but notice that I've actually still stayed on the wrong layer, on the whiteout layer. We're going to really want to select the pixels of layer 0 of our original sketch layer. So I'm just going to deselect that and try again. Now you'll notice I've set the tolerance extremely low. The higher the tolerance, the more inclusive Photoshop is about the pixels that it selects. So when I click there, I got those pixels. You got to be careful. It really depends on where you click. It's a bit of hit or miss. You sometimes want to try a couple of times. If I increase the tolerance, it's going to select some of those other darker pixels that I really don't want to select there. So I really need to keep a tolerance pretty low for this kind of work. It's actually more about where you click, what pixel, what color you happen to land upon. You can always use the shift key afterward to add additional colors into the mix. So that's actually a better thing to do. Work with the lower tolerance and then just shift click to add some of the colors in that you're missing, or some of the pixels in that you're missing. And don't be afraid to press Command D and try again. After all, this still is faster than using the paintbrush. Okay, so now what we can do is we can simply fill that area with white. Make sure you go back to your whiteout layer to do it. I like to pre-hide my selection. Command or Control H, that hides the edges so that I can really see what it is that Photoshop's going to fill. And then Option Delete or Alt Backspace on a Windows PC to fill the area with your selected foreground color, which happens to be white in this case, so that works out perfectly. Alt Delete or Option Backspace fills the entire area with white. Now if you just contrast this area to some of the other areas that I've done, it's a lot harsher. That edge is pretty rough. Those pixels are pretty unforgiving. They're either selected or they're not. So we're going to undo that. Command Z. And we've got to try to find a way of softening up that edge. So the most obvious way is to go to the Select menu, Select, Modify, and Feather. Feathering is like using a soft edge brush. It adds a bit of softness to the edges of our selection. So I'm just going to feather 2 pixels out, 2 pixels in. So that's a total of 4 pixels. My value here is 2. And do that. And then hide the edges again with Command H and then Option Delete or Alt Backspace, and that fills it. Looks like I've probably chosen just a little bit too high of a feather value, but you can see that that kind of compares to the edges around it. Now if you just compare it again, it does seem to be just a little bit softer than the other selection, but it has to be because of that, the roughness of that magic wand selection. So it's not really quite as good. It's effective in this area, but just not anywhere near as clean as using the brush tool with a little bit of patience. Let's take a look at how this is looking now. You can press Control 0 to make it fit in the screen. Not bad, a little bit, maybe still a little bit on the dark side. One of the things that I'm noticing here, I've got a couple of construction lines, wouldn't mind cleaning up. We're not going to spend hours cleaning up every single sketch and making them perfect. After all, they are just sketches. But if you have an obvious construction line and you're in there, you might want to clean it up. So there's a couple of strategies for cleaning up construction lines. One is we could just sample the level of gray around it by Alt-clicking or Option-clicking on the Mac and clicking on the background, and that just picks up the color there, and then we can brush that away. So that's not bad, except for it does create, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on YouTube, but it does create a flat area of color. We can go through with a much smaller brush, and that will minimize that, make it harder to notice, but there is still a seam there. We're not keeping some of that paper texture, that sketch texture, that's just sort of natural with the paper grade. Another technique would be to use the healing brush tool, which is a great tool. Always use a hard edge brush when you use the healing brush tool. Problem with the healing brush tool, as you can see, it didn't do anything right now because we want to make sure we're sampling all layers. So we sample all layers because I'm drawing onto my whiteout layer, but I actually really want to sample from the bottom layer. So the healing brush tool ought to work great in a circumstance like that. It doesn't do so well near the edges of things because it actually tries to pick up some of the color. So it's picking up some of the darkness from this edge. You can just see it there. In the middle section it works great. So that could be a really good way of cleaning up some of the the middle parts of the construction line. Do use smaller strokes when you're using the healing brush. Works a lot better. We're still going to need a strategy to fix these guys here that get closer to the edge. So for that, the rubber stamp tool is going to be the way to go. Here's our rubber stamp tool. We're going to just use, I don't think I need to teach you guys how to use the rubber stamp tool. Just make sure that sample all layers is turned on if we're going to be working on a construction layer like that, and then option click somewhere on the texture to pick it up, and then just click and drag to clean it up. That's going to be the fastest way. You can probably dispense with the healing brush tool altogether and just use this technique for this kind of stuff. It's great for copying the paper texture. In fact, it's also great for drawing. If you happen to, let's say I needed another line over here, I could copy my texture from here, and see, that allows me to draw kind of what looks like a pencil sketch line, because it's copying the texture from here over to there. Here's another area that I want to fix. Perfect example. I'm going to copy some of this texture and I'm going to place it over top of there and just sort of clean that up so I can preserve that line. No one's going to be the wiser. They're not going to realize that I fixed a smudge there. Just be careful when you do this. It's addictive. I know it feels like you're already saying, come on, I want to get out of here and do something else, but it's addictive. Once you get in here, you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to clean up this line too now. And the next thing you know, you're cleaning up your entire sketch, and the next thing you know, you're actually practically redrawing your logo in Photoshop. And that's really not the objective here. We really just want to do some quick touch-ups. You don't want to spend more than 10-15 minutes in total cleaning this stuff up. Otherwise, you might be better off just resketching it and trying to go for a cleaner sketch, or better yet, go for a cleaner photograph, some better lighting, and then you can do a lot more. Okay, so there we go. That's looking pretty nice. Like I say, it's addictive. Now I'm seeing this construction line. Come on, it's just at one point you got to say this is good enough. Okay, so we've got that. It's again nicely against a white background. If we want, we can try one more time to adjust the levels and just see what that gets us. I've got my doubts because I think we're going to lose some of that really nice, softer sketching texture, but we can give it a shot with a final level layer over top. And yeah, no, that's not going to work. You see, as soon as we do that, yeah, we're getting rid of some of that background, but we're also getting rid of some of that nice contrast. So there's not much that we can really do here and still preserve the nice sketched feel. So that's just going to get deleted. Whoops. Okay. And there we go. Perfect. Ready for importing. So save it. You can save it as a PSD if you're importing into InDesign. My preference always when importing into InDesign is to save as a TIFF. TIFF file format. It's really the best file format to save images, sketches, anything really that's going to be brought into InDesign or Illustrator. It makes for a larger file, but it does still have compression. The difference between a TIFF file and a JPEG is that although the TIFF file does have compression to reduce the file size from the uncompressed original size, the JPEG's compression is lossy compression. It does lose information. It loses quality every time you save an image as a JPEG. Whereas if you take an image and save it as a TIFF, it will drop down to about half of its original size, but it will not lose any quality at all. When you bring it into InDesign, or even if you open it up in Photoshop and then save it again, it will not progressively lose quality. One thing you want to do when you're working with TIFFs, though, is do uncheck the layers option. Turn that off. That'll automatically turn this as a copy on. What that does is it automatically flattens the image. We do not want to be keeping our layers when we save the TIFF file, especially since some of those layers are adjustment layers and the TIFF file wouldn't understand that anyway. We definitely want to flatten that image. There's no point, I don't know a single application where there's going to be a benefit to maintaining the layers and working with a TIFF file. If you want to retain the layers, do yourself a favor, stay with the Photoshop file format. So there we go, save it. The one thing you do want to turn on when you're saving a TIFF file is turn on the LZW compression. Do not turn on the JPEG compression. That is a lossy compression and it gives you no benefits to saving as a TIFF file. TIFF file does come with this great Lempo-Ziv compression that has about a 50% compression ratio and does not lose any quality at all. And then we hit OK, and off we go. So happy logo cleanup, and I hope to see some improved logos from you guys in the future.